Good evening, Oakland and beyond. It's been a while. Unplanned month plus break for this little podcast right here, and even one for our sister podcast as well over at the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. Get into that a little bit more here in a wee little bit, and also we'll be coming at you solo with one person during this edition of the show, as the main man, the boss man, was a late-minute cancellation, but hey, it is what it is. As our intro song says, life goes on. Without further ado, though, let's go ahead and get show number 334, the Star Wars Day edition of your number one source for everything and anything on your Oakland, for now, athletics, underway. Welcome, everybody, as after a month plus away, we are right back at you here, finally, on AsFAnRAdio in this YouTube exclusive broadcast. Hope everyone's been doing good out there in this month plus that we have been away from y'all. It is, of course, the legally 5150 Cpl Oaktown coming at you from the third version of Dub 6 Studios. The last time we came at you, it was, of course, the final broadcast from the Eastmont version of Dub 6 Studios, or Dub 6 Studios 2.0, as we like to call it. So this YouTube exclusive happens to be the debut broadcast from Dub 6 Studios 3.0, which, of course, is now located in the Dimond district. I've been settled in over here for just a little bit over a month, which kind of happens to coincide with this little break we've been on. Been trying to basically get issues with the Wi-Fi set up over here, so that way we can start streaming not just broadcasts for our show, but for the Bear Raid live again as well, you know, outside of obviously doing stuff for the YouTube channels, or for the YouTube channel, I should say, and whatnot. But pretty much basically the issue's been trying to either get things set up for Comcast to continue our service over here, because Comcast had been providing the service for the majority of the time that we had been doing AFR over there at the Eastmont variant of Dub 6 Studios the last couple of years. And pretty much the gist of it is every house on the block here, except for the one we're in, which used to be my late mother-in-law's house, is wired for Comcast, but for some reason nothing was ever set up to come in to this spot, because of the fact that my late mother-in-law had mainly AT&T and its successors, or various companies that AT&T bought out over the course of the decades and whatnot. So nothing was ever done here. It basically looked like that pretty much in order to get stuff in here, they would have to dig stuff up. And my landlord, who happens to be my sister-in-law now, because she inherited the house after my mother-in-law passed away, doesn't really like the idea of the digging, and I don't blame her for that. I wouldn't want to either, especially with some of the modifications that were made to the front portion of the property during the last several years that my mother-in-law was alive, you know, that were done to assist with her recovering from her stroke and other issues that she had in her later years. So the other option that we're working with, and we're hoping that we got figured out right now finally, is there was AT&T Wi-Fi here at the house during the time my mother-in-law was living here. So we've gotten that upgrade. We've hopefully gotten things figured out with that. Plan is to resume live shows with next week's edition of AsFAnRAdio. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Obviously, though, we got the option with this OSB program we use to be able to not just stream but record the shows as well. So if for some reason, when we do go back to doing live broadcasts next week, if shit cuts out on the Twitch channel, we'll still have at least a recording to throw up on the YouTube channel. So that's part of the reason why we've been away for a month plus. Also, myself and the boss man have had some stuff come up we've had to address, family related and just other stuff in general. Have to help the families out with things as well. And obviously, just, you know, it wasn't planned, but, you know, sometimes a little breather is needed, even if it was an unplanned one, especially with a lot of the shenanigans that we'll be getting into with this edition of the broadcast. And in case you missed out things at the intro, well, that's going to be hard to do if you're watching this, because I got to remember, I'm sitting here thinking that this is a live broadcast when I got to remember, oh yeah, this is being recorded for the YouTube channel, because again, the whole Wi-Fi situation, which again, hoping is finally addressed when we return to doing live stuff on the Twitch channel next week. Corporal is doing this one solo, and of course, it's actually just a little after 8:50 my time in real world time. Not that that really matters to y'all that are watching this over on the YouTube channel once you get around to doing it. But obviously, it was supposed to start recording it at 8 o'clock. Boss Man was caught up in some stuff at the time, trying to get back to the house and also trying to handle some business that he was in the middle of addressing at that point in time. And that business still carrying over. Hit me up just a little bit after between 8:30, 8:40-ish and let me know, hey, not going to be able to do it. I was like, hey, fine, got it. I'll take care of it. So the stuff that I'll be getting ready to touch bases on here in a little bit. We'll have to wait until next week's 510 day edition of AFR to hear Boss Man's thoughts on the A's, everything that has to do with the A's for that matter. Real quickly on that note, before we get underway here for the first time in over a month plus, for those of you watching this, this will be a modified version of our show broadcast. And if you're not familiar with that, and you've missed out with the couple occasions that we have done this, or when our sister podcast, The Bear Raid, has done a quote-unquote modified show, either as a YouTube exclusive or even on the Twitch channel as well. Modified broadcast for us basically is we don't have any breaks. And as far as things go here on AFR, we won't be doing our infamous X-rated second half of the broadcast for this week's edition of the show. That will resume, of course, when we go back to doing things on Twitch live, hopefully next week. And even if that ends up not being the case, the recording for YouTube will be back to being that full-on regular around to sometimes 2+ hour edition of the show that y'all are, of course, accustomed to. So that's what y'all have to look forward to tonight is, again, a modified edition of the show that basically, again, no breaks, no second half of the show. It's just going to be straight through on all the segments that I'll be touching bases on this edition of the broadcast. We're, again, coming at you solo since the main man, the boss man, was a late-minute cancellation. Now, let's go ahead and, on that note, get things going in this debut broadcast from the third version of Dub6 Studios, located now in the Dimond district of Oakland, California. And unfortunately, not the way I wanted to christen the debut here at the new version of Dub6 Studios. In the time since we have been away from you, we did our last show right in between the end of the spring training slate of games and right before opening night went down on March the 30th. We obviously figured that we were going to be right back in the swing of things the following week, that we weren't going to have all these issues with the Wi-Fi that I just told you all here at the beginning, here at the intro of the show. We figured we were going to be right back in the middle of doing things. The A's obviously got a win on opening night. I'll get more into that a little bit in a modified look-through of what the A's have been up to start the season since the last time we came at y'all here on the show. And the things were looking, positive at that point and for a little while afterwards as far as things were going on the Howard Terminal ballpark front. On opening day, they won a case where the final lawsuit against the EIR was tossed out of court. That was basically the one that the East Oakland Stadium Alliance had been involved in. You had pretty much heard rumbles through the underground that things were starting to pick back up as far as talks go between the A's and the City of Oakland on getting something hammered out and finalized so they could finally get to a binding vote on the Howard Terminal project. Everything looking all good, maybe hearing something possibly, a couple weeks ago. And then basically around about 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the night before 420 and pretty much in the hours and days since 6 p.m. on the eve before 420, shit's gone completely south as far as things go with the matters with the ballpark, and at the point now where, we're not just talking about things as far as a ballpark location goes, but also, unfortunately, and possibly the future of this franchise in the city of Oakland is, of course, on the let me go and just kind of build some context up here, building up to what went down at 6 p.m. on Wednesday April the 19th. Pretty much there had been a meeting, I want to say, forgot the exact time frame, sometime near the end of February, beginning of March, where Mayor Shang Tao met with A's team president Dave Covell and A's majority owner John Fisher to basically have a sit-down, talk, and agreement to no longer negotiate through the media in regards to things with the Howard Terminal project, to be crystal clear, 100% straightforward with each other on things going forward. And of course, talk's been that they had been pretty much negotiating on and off in some extent, even up to this point in time when this meeting took place. But it seems like the kind of things picked back up. At least it seemed like that was the case after this meeting between Mayor Tao, Dave Covell, and John Fisher took place. The A's actually encouraged the city to get together and set up things for a ballpark summit conference type setup that was basically slated to take place, and to some extent did go down, leading into the evening of Wednesday, April the 19th, where you had both sides pitching things back and forth, and communication pretty much going on leading up until the Tuesday evening. I want to say it was Tuesday, April the 18th. There was still talks going on back and forth between the A's and the city in regards to this whole ballpark summit and whatnot. And that the plan was on Friday to have possibly a press conference to announce that they had finally closed the off-site infrastructure funding gap, which apparently, with pending grants that are looking like they were going to be coming down the pipe, pretty much was down to somewhere between 88 and 90 million. A little chip in the bucket, you think, for a guy that's worth $2.2 billion and owns a Major League Baseball team and also an MLS team and small little minority stake in a European soccer team. You think that he or others, would be able to come to an agreement and work out something to close that gap. So anyway, like I said, both parties in communication with each other leading up through the evening of Tuesday, April the 18th. Wednesday the 19th comes along, and of course, talks are going on. A's are supposed to call the city reps, City of Oakland representatives that are tied into the negotiations. You also have a third-party rep that was brought in to help out smooth things. That pretty much was an individual that was very familiar with John Fisher. That time frame basically comes and goes that the A's were supposed to call in, and nothing happens. They apparently were having a meeting at their front office at that point in time, and that meeting carried over, and that was when, kind of some initial red flags started to go off. And then Mayor Tao gets a phone call at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Wednesday, April the 19th. So now you're finally getting what I was hearing, what I was alluding to with all this. And it's Dave Covell basically letting her know that they have reached what was being reported initially as a binding agreement for land down in Las Vegas. I think it was where the Wild West Casino used to be located down there. I'm really not familiar with all that. And obviously when Bosch shares his thoughts on this next week, he can touch bases more on that, since he's actually been down there in the area prior to when us and others kind of, said F that to doing things really down there in Vegas. So basically, that the A's had entered into what was initially being reported as a binding agreement for land down there in Las Vegas. It's since come out that it's not really a binding agreement. It's more, a verbal agreement and whatnot, but I'll get more to that here in a little bit. And basically that kind of, blindsided Mayor Tao and pissed her off, and I don't blame her. I would have been extremely pissed off with that, especially given the fact that you just had this meeting not even a month plus prior to this, that you weren't going to do this anymore. You weren't going to do stuff through the media. You weren't going to leak stuff through the media, because you had, I think it was the Nevada Independent leaked out something prior to this phone call taking place, apparently. And they went doing this. So basically, the mayor took it as, the A's continuing to try to use the cities of Oakland and Las Vegas against each other as leverage to try to get a stadium somewhere, and pretty much told Dave, that's it. We're done. I'm breaking off negotiations pretty much at that point. Um, in between that and a couple hours later, I guess that third-party negotiator that was close buddies with John Fisher gets a hold of Fisher and pretty much goes off on him for, how the mayor got blindsided with all this, and straight up tells John, you need to call Mayor Tao, like, now. So a couple hours after this whole phone call with Covell takes place, Fisher apparently calls the mayor at that point and is like, oh, I want to keep lines of communication open, da-da-da-da-da. This isn't us trying to do all that. We're not trying to leverage one of y'all against the other and all that. And, and pretty much to sum up what the mayor told John, it was pretty much along the lines of, I gave Covell my response. And, oh, by the way, if you want to resume talks on Howard Terminal, you're going to call me or call the city. And pretty much ever since that news came out, A's ownership has been getting completely blindsided, blasted, destroyed, and humiliated in newspapers, social media, various news networks and whatnot. And this is obviously just not here locally in the Bay Area. This is actually nationally that Fisher, Covell, and these guys are getting destroyed for all this. You're basically being looked at as literally running the Major League playbook, obviously referring to the movie Major League. You have people out there that feel like, this whole quote-unquote rooted in Oakland thing was a scam possibly the whole time, given that some out there had heard possible rumors of Covell and a group of A's reps being in Vegas back in 2017, potentially. Something else that Boss will probably touch bases on when he talks about things next week. People like myself, Boss, the Oakland 68s, people out there that were considered to be the influencers for this professional baseball team and help push stuff with, the fan base, we're getting the ballpark done, all that stuff. We feel like we basically have gotten burned and used at this point. And, you've had people out there comparing Covell to the monorail guy from The Simpsons at pretty much at this point. That's how they feel about the matter. And, just the fact that this is yet again the continued ongoing failures of a individual that's supposed to be a billionaire that yet doesn't want to commit any money of his own to making this happen. He promised the people of San Jose when they built the stadium for the Earthquakes, oh, I'm going to invest in payroll, we're going to compete, da-da-da-da-da. Stadium's been open, almost, between half a decade and almost a full decade, and they're still bottom five in the MLS. A lot of us, have questioned, and you've heard us brought us up on the show many times ourselves here, that, even with us supporting the Howard Terminal project, we never felt that John was ever going to do anything, and ultimately the end game, be it with either Howard Terminal, somewhere else in Oakland, or if he ended up relocating the team, is that he was going to sell after that stadium opened up. But, as mentioned, they're getting destroyed locally and nationally at this point. And it kind of, irks me, and I feel it to be a little bit funny that some out there, not just locally but nationally, are now finally calling these bastards out on their shenanigans when some of y'all out there were contributing to the anti-Oakland agenda, that it was our fault, the city's fault, the fans' fault, that people weren't showing up. In reality, it was the shenanigans of not just this ownership group, but the Schottenhoffman ownership that preceded it. It's nearly 3 decades of constant threats to leave Oakland and, low payrolls and all sorts of other BS. That's why hardly anyone's really at the stadium anymore. And, with all this stuff going on, the 68s are still out there, but as a result of this, they're not going to bring the drums out there unless either a commitment to Oakland's made, or as they prefer, the team to be sold, which seems to be the vibe with the majority of the fan base at this point. But, again, before I get all sidetracked and stuff, people out there locally and nationally that were feeding into that whole, oh, it's Oakland's fault, it's the fans' fault, that are now going after the ownership group. And obviously certain individuals that I'm not going to name, but y'all pretty much know who I'm talking about, tied to the local media, mainly the San Francisco Chronicle, that were pushing the anti-Howard Terminal agenda for months. One of them specifically, was hilarious that they were doing that because the individual sheeped and basically, simped for Oracle Park to be done and built back when that project was going on. Even those individuals are now throwing their names into the mix and, throwing shade at Fisher. And I guess, yeah, it's appreciated. It's about damn time that you started putting the ownership on blast. But at the same time, don't think you can use it to get away from the fact that you've contributed to some of the falsehoods about the fan base in the city and the stadium project over the years, and just things in general through not just this ownership but the previous ownership as well. We got receipts for y'all out there, not just us, but others out there got receipts for you individuals locally and nationally as well. So, yeah, thanks that you're finally speaking on this, but it would have also been at the same time appreciated if you would have been doing this for all these years that us and others in the fan base and those that have been in the know outside of our fan base have seen this going on. And, not just, members of, the media and fans here and across the country doing it. It's getting lampooned in Vegas, mainly because of the fact that they want to put $500 million public dollars into this. And, you got people out there that are still pissed off about the $750 million that they're paying for the Raiders stadium. And it's not like these folks don't want an MLB team out there, and I'm not trying to hate on that situation. It's the same way they looked at things with the NFL. They had no problem with the NFL coming out there. They just didn't want the Raiders. They wanted their own thing, a la, to use as an example, the NHL's Golden Knights down there, a team that was original, they could call their own, build up an original fan base behind, all that good stuff. And, just given the tourist trap that Vegas is, they're talking about, I forgot what it was, something between 40 to 100 million tourists a year in the ballpark there potentially. I don't buy that, not with all the other stuff that's going on down there. And, you've heard us and others talk smack about how the Raiders basically play 17 away games now because of going out there. It'll be 162 away games for these guys. I've seen, others have seen, and just through, myself and others scrolling through comments on some of the stuff out there coming out of the city of Las Vegas, that basically a lot of the people down there are not liking this at all. They're not liking the fact of throwing money in, would rather have their own team, and just given the history of John Fisher being put out there, regardless if these people have been following along all these years that us and others have been putting it out there for the world to see, if they're just now learning about this shit at this point in time. They don't want to deal with a billionaire that's a penny pincher when it comes to being a sports owner. So, bottom line is the A's blew this. And you got folks out there like Casey Pratt, and I'm not going to lie, to some extent myself and Boss Man, that given Fisher's history with doing things that, as badly as we wanted Howard Terminal, I'm not shocked, sadly, that this bunghole, crapped it away and basically blew it off. I heard reports from some pretty solid insiders that there were some days for the last couple of years where Fisher would wake up and he'd be basically flip-flopping back and forth between building Howard Terminal and doing something in Vegas. So just it's ridiculous, and it's bullshit that Rob Manfred wants to sit there and be like, oh, they've done everything they can and da-da-da-da-da. They've been doing everything since 2014. Shut the hell up, Rob. It's basically been, again, nearly 3 decades of 2 ownership groups trying to move this team out of Oakland with only one serious effort to do something in Oakland that at this point in time some of us are, really wondering if it was a legit effort or if you all were just bullshitting us with the Howard Terminal project. Again, starting with Schott and Hoffman from 1995 to 2004. They told Walter Haas before they bought the team, Walter asked him, hey, I'm going to sell you the team. It gets approved. You got to promise me that you keep this team in Oakland. And Schott and Hoffman are like, yeah, okay, sure, we'll do that. Not even within a few months of those two getting control of the team in 95, they're talking about moving the team out of Oakland. They're talking crap about Oakland, talking about the, crap about the fans, talking about Big Mac and guys of on the squad at that point in time being overpaid and all this crazy crap. They tried for years to relocate the franchise to Santa Clara, while during that time you had multiple efforts being pushed by not just fan groups but people in the city of Oakland to get 20th and Telegraph potentially done as a stadium site. And everybody talks about how Jerry Brown killed that project. Look, I got my issues with Jerry, but you talk to individuals out there like Chris D. Benintendi and even members of Baseball Oakland, they will tell you that Brown was willing and open to doing the 20th and Telegraph ballpark. He was just wanted the A's to come to the table and actually talk about things. Schottenhofman never did. That was, again, during the time when they were trying to move the team to Santa Clara or somewhere in the South Bay. Then, you got John Fisher and Lou Wolf, who buy the team and get control of things starting in 2005. You have that whole 66 to Coliseum site that was tossed out there and looked at, which, looking back on things and even then kind of really felt like it was never really a serious thing. At the same time that was being done, the team went and tried to buy land down there at Pacific Commons in Fremont and try to move the team down to Fremont. When things didn't work out with that, they tried to get land closer to where the Warm Springs BART station would ultimately end up being built. That didn't pan out either, and they gave up on Fremont at that point. And again, even though 20th and Telegraph was off the table at that point, you had the city of Oakland presenting multiple options for stadium locations during that time. One of them being Howard Terminal, that was being thrown out there. You had the Coliseum site. You at one point, of course, had what was one of the ones that was thrown out there at one point? Where that little storage facility is over there near the Jack London Amtrak station. Can't remember it off the top of my head, but you had spots in Oakland that were thrown out there by city officials, and the A's just ignored it, tried to pursue Fremont. That didn't happen. Everyone thought they'd come back and finally actually try something in Oakland, and that was when they tried to go to San Jose, which everyone knew was DOA, even though kind of many suspected that was Lou Wolf's true intentions. Kind of funny that the minority owner was basically, seemed like he had, was the mouthpiece at that point, but who knows with how the structure of things were at that point. But anyway, they tried to do the whole going effort to San Jose. As you all know, San Jose at one time was in the A's territorial rights. They gave it to the Giants in the 90s, so that way the Giants could try to get something maybe with a ballpark in San Jose. That didn't happen. The Giants almost went to Tampa Bay. Then Peter McGowan and his group bought the team. They stayed. They ultimately got what is now known as Oracle Park built, and part of the agreement, I guess, apparently when Haas sold them the territorial rights is regardless if they got a stadium built in San Jose or if they got something built in San Francisco, they would keep the territorial rights at that point. And the A's fan base is kind of split still to this day on that. Some feel that the A's should have gotten the chance to go to San Jose as a result of that. Myself and others obviously call bullshit because of the fact that there was, still options to look at in Oakland at that point in time. Obviously, San Jose crashed and burned, didn't end up happening, and then that's when the team finally came back to looking at doing stuff here in Oakland. And then, of course, ultimately, Fisher was, forced out. Wolf was forced out. My bad on that. Only owns 1% of the team now at this point in time with really no say in the matter or whatnot. Covell was brought in. They tried to do stuff with Laney. That ultimately didn't happen. They spent the last couple of years on things with Howard Terminal. COVID kind of ended up ultimately delaying things with that, as it did with pretty much everything else that was going on in the world at that point in time. MLB got impatient, started the whole parallel path thing, and now we're here at this point in time. And again, just to piggyback a little bit, not mad at the mayor for breaking off negotiations. Again, just the way that this was handled, I would have done the same thing. If y'all missed her press conference, she was pissed during that. Since that time, it again has been put out there by her and other city officials that they are willing to reopen negotiations with the team. Call them whenever. They would prefer a new ownership group to work with at this point, but team gives them a call, they're willing to talk things and get things going at that point. So pretty much it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to that. Meanwhile, the A's are trying to get legislation passed before I believe it's the end of May, beginning of next month, because that's when the legislation period ends down there in the state of Nevada to try to get that $500 million to help out with things, and not really looking good with that. A lot of the politicians down there are really slamming the hell out of that, and don't blame them, given the fact that a lot of the individuals that voted in favor of the Raiders getting $750 million ended up seeing themselves getting voted out of office the next time their seats were up. And this is the reality of things: is you should not have to hand a guy that owns a professional sports team and a professional sport that generates billions of dollars money when that sport and that owner can pay that. And obviously, with Gap stock going down, a whole bunch of other things, you're really starting to wonder: is this guy really worth $2.2 billion, or is this guy broke? Bottom line, the reality is, instead of MLB having allowed things to get to the point that they are now, the reality is they should be forcing this J-Cat, John Fisher, to sell the team to a group of local investors that will not only keep the team in Oakland, not only get Howard Terminal built, but obviously do something that has not been done since Walter Haas owned the team, ladies and gentlemen. That's actually invest in the franchise, and that's regardless of if it were Joe Lacob, regardless about how we and others, we here at the show and others out there obviously have our opinions because of how things played out with the Warrior move, but, him or somebody else out here don't really want Muskrat involved with that, and glad to see that most of the A's fans out there, or at least A's Twitter, agrees say no to Muskrat on owning the A's. But bottom line, there's, team needs to be sold to a local group that will get all that done and actually have the A's secured here. And the bottom line is this is supposed to be a legacy franchise. This is one of your oldest American League teams, charter member of the American League in 1901. Already have relocated 3 times, been in Philadelphia, Kansas City, Oakland. Do you really want to add a 4th city in Las Vegas? And you also talk about how you're trying to regain interest in MLB in the African-American community. Why the hell are you going to take a team out of a city that has one of the biggest African-American communities in your MLB markets? Not to mention it's a market that has contributed multiple MLB players and players that went on to be stars and future Hall of Famers in your sport. That doesn't make any sense. It's also your 4th biggest market, 6th to 8th overall, in 4th biggest market in baseball, 6th to 8th biggest market overall period in the country, and you want to move to the 40th, and have these guys basically they would be on revenue sharing for the rest of their lives, being down there. And I don't care about this whole thing about, they're not going to be charged a relocation fee. Bullshit. Manfred could say that all the hell he wants. I do not see the other 29 owners passing up the chance for some money, and especially some of the rumbles about a lot of them getting pissed off with John Fisher. Truthfully, if I were the owners, enough of them, I'd be getting together and calling for a special meeting to force the sale of the team at this point. And that's really what should be going on. So, definitely, regardless if this whole thing in Vegas blows up in the A's face or it ends up happening, we will keep y'all up to date on that here as the year goes on. And obviously, with the possibility of the A's relocating, that obviously brings into question for many of you all out there that are probably wondering, what is the future of AsFAnRAdio should the A's end up relocating to Las Vegas? Obviously, myself and others, regardless of how much of a fool's hope it is at this point that this thing falls through and they do end up staying, and either after Howard Terminal gets done or before they finalize things with that, Fisher's forced to sell the team, that they do stay here. But obviously, myself, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you out there, I know this is the case from Boss Man, I've unfortunately have mentally prepared myself to be ready for the case that this ends up happening. And obviously, until we see some sort of concrete evidence that this whole thing is going to blow up, we sadly are going to be approaching the remainder of this year as if it's our final season of doing the show, which is really unfortunate given the fact that this is the 20th anniversary year of this podcast taking place in some shape or form. Obviously, we had that little 4-year hiatus that went down from 2007 to 2011. But yeah, this would end up being the 20th and final year if this whole relocation goes down. And there was a part of me that a couple weeks ago had this show ended up happening. I thought about killing it that night had I done it a couple weeks ago. But then, things kicked in and, my brain got the best of me. And the reality is that's not fair to all of you out there. Even if you are sharing the same feelings that myself, Bossman, and all the cast, past and present, are feeling in regards to this whole matter right now. That's not fair to y'all that have been tuning in to this show, regardless if you're just a recent addition to following the madness here on AFR, if you've been following since the beginning of when I took over producing the show, when we came back in October of 2011, or if you're amongst the few out there that have been actually listening to this show since it dropped all the way back in 2003 when Chris Dobbins and Francis Brooks were running the show for its first several years on the air from 2003 to 2007. That wasn't going to be fair to y'all to just, end things right then and there. So the plan going forward is, again, we are going to approach this as if this relocation is going to happen and take it as if this is going to be the final year of AsFAnRAdio. Obviously, if things change with that, then that won't be the case. Then we'll look forward to doing the show for many years to come and seeing the team staying here into the future until myself, Boss, and the current cast kicks the bucket and, another group takes on the mantle and runs the show after us for who knows how many decades after that. That's obviously the hope. But, again, going to look at it as if this relocation to Las Vegas is going to happen and that basically finish off things with the regular season, regardless of how this team continues to play the rest of the way out. We'll do a final postseason edition, or do final postseason edition broadcasts of the show, even if, as expected, this team doesn't end up making the playoffs. And I'd be really fucking shocked if the A's somehow end up making it to the postseason, and we'll get to that obviously here in a bit when I take an abbreviated look at how things have played out up to this point in time since opening day for the Oakland Athletics. Yeah, pretty much finish off things through the end of the regular season, do a final month's worth of playoff editions of AFR, and then about 2 weeks after the playoffs wrap up, we would do our farewell broadcast, basically season in review and our farewell show at that point, because we're not going to support this team in Las Vegas. Y'all have heard our feelings multiple times over the years about how things played out with the Raiders going down there, how we didn't support that. Myself and Bossman are amongst the many out there that are not supporting the Warriors since they went across the bay to the Chase Center over there in San Francisco. And it's going to be the same case here. In my eye, Boss's eyes, and I know many of y'all's eyes out there, the mindset is pretty much once a team moves out of Oakland, y'all no longer exist to us. What's the point of me rooting for a franchise that's not tied to my community anymore? I mean, yeah, I root for the University of California over in Berkeley because that's the closest major university to us, and, my grandmother was offered a scholarship, there and chose to turn it down instead and raise a family, but, she rooted for Cal after that, so that's why I did that. And I root for the Sharks because they're the closest NHL team we have. But all the other teams I've rooted for the majority of my life have been teams right here in the town. And, I'm sorry. I'm not going to support you if you dip out here, especially given these circumstances. Y'all have sat here and poked the bear that is the A's fan base with two ownership groups through nearly 3 fucking decades with threats of leaving here. You really think we're still going to follow you out there? To hell with that. And for me personally, given the fact that we're still waiting for rightful justice to be levied against the individual that murdered my aunt in Reno back in July of 2020, that's even more reason for me to not support the team going out there. And that's nothing personal to individuals out there that I know that call Las Vegas and the state of Nevada home, but just, y'all's state is fucking my family over. So I'm not going to contribute to that. I'm not going to support that. And, again, it sucks, but that's just the cold, hard reality of things, people. This podcast was dedicated and has been dedicated and always will be dedicated to covering baseball talk on the Oakland Athletics from the Oakland A's fan point of view. We're not supporting the Las Vegas A's. That's pure and simple. So, yeah, this relocation ends up happening. This will be the 20th and final season of AFR. And the legacy will live on in the sister podcasts. As, of course, back in November 2020, I started doing the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill with a couple of the guys up on Tightwad Hill, and one of our fellow co-hosts here on AFR, Tito Soulchild, is also tied to the cast of that show. Never thought that when we finally got that rolling, that it might get to the point where, hey, that might be the lone show that I'm doing possibly at some point. But to some extent, I guess it was a blessing in disguise if things play out the way they're looking right now. But, again, should that happen, the A's move, this will be the last year of A's Fan Radio, and our legacy will live on in the Bear Raid presented by Tightwad Hill. And I've extended the opportunity, by the way, for Bossman to join me either full-time or, on and off part-time over on the Bear Raid, because, not only is this the 20th anniversary year of A's Fan Radio, it's the 10th anniversary year of when myself and the Bossman formed what's become known as the Dynamic Duo. And regardless of, if things are about to end with this show once the 2023 MLB season comes to a close because of the possibility of the A's going to Las Vegas. That's a tag team broadcasting partnership that I don't want to see end. I'd love to see that continue on the Bear Raid or, elsewhere, because, maybe I'll start up a show with him and others out there where maybe we talk about East Bay sports or Bay Area sports just to fill the void. Maybe I look into joining up with, the Roots podcast or another podcast out there talking stuff. Obviously things are going to have to be continued down the road, but again, just crazy that 20 years of being on this with a whole bunch of various people, 10 years of doing this craziness with Bossman, and just I hate to see it possibly end, but again, I'm not going to support these bastards in Vegas. Boss isn't going to support them in Vegas, and pretty much everyone else that's on the cast is not going to support these guys in Vegas. So, sorry, that happens. This will be the 20th and final year of A's Fan Radio. And by the way, that was all the stuff that I was going to pretty much mention in the blog post that I was supposed to put out in the days leading up to recording this show. That obviously didn't happen because things got crazy on my end. But, that's pretty much to just sum up what's going on here with that. So, again, if things change and the A's end up staying here in Oakland, then it won't be the 20th and final year of A's Fan Radio. It'll just be the 20th anniversary season of A's Fan Radio. But if it continues down the path of it looking like that they are going to head out to the desert and just basically play second and third or fifth fiddle to the tourist trap out there that's lost wages, then this will be the 20th and final season of AFR. One little positive note, I guess we could say, in all of this is that obviously, as you see here on the broadcast, it's not the 10th anniversary logo that we've been using lazily for the last several years. It's a blown-up version of the logo that Guy Shawinski, of course, put on that Dynamic Duo cover art that he drew for myself and Bossman. We are actually in the midst of awaiting a 20th anniversary logo that is being put together by our good friend A's Fan by Design. So shout out and thank you again to A's Fan by Design for putting our 20th anniversary logo together. That will be up and about here in the coming weeks because he's got some things on his end that he's currently handling at the moment. So looking forward to finally at least getting that up there. And pretty much it's going to look kind of similar to what you're seeing here with the filler logo and how the 10th anniversary logo looked with some modifications to it. But I'll go ahead and let you all wait until we get that from A's Fan by Design to see that one. So, look forward to having a 20th anniversary logo finally. Just will be sad if this does sadly end up being the 20th and final season of A's Fan Radio. On that note, since we haven't done a show since the end of March. Let's go ahead and real quickly here do a modified look of how things have played out so far to this point for the Oakland, for now, Athletics. Season, of course, began back on March the 30th. We're up to May the 4th, Star Wars Day, hence why it's the Star Wars Day edition of AsFANRAdio. And again, real quickly, here's what the A's have been up to begin the 2023 MLB season. They began things back on Thursday, March 30th, when they played the first of a 3-game set against the Anaheim Angels. The A's getting the W on opening night as they defeated Anaheim by the final score of 2-1. They would have a random off day on March the 31st. That was set up for some reason. I want to say Thursday was the first time since, I think, the late 60s, early 70s that every team played a game on opening day, and that pretty much that off day was set up there in case you had to have, games made up because of rainouts and whatnot. But every game ended up being played that day. So the A's starting off game 1 of 62 in a positive direction. Unfortunately, from game 2 of 62 and on, it would turn into a wee bit of a dumpster fire. The A's would finish off the 3-game set with the Angels to begin the month of April by losing Game 2 by a final score of 13-1 on Saturday, April the 1st, and then they would get shut out in the series finale on Sunday the 2nd by a final score of 6-0. After the Angels left town, of course, the Cleveland Guardians would come into town for a 3-game series, which, of course, be the final games of this 6-game homestand to open up things in Oakland. The Guardians would take the first game on Monday, April the 3rd by a final of 12-11. The A's would win Game 2 of the series by a final score of 4-3 on Tuesday, April the 4th, and then they, of course, would drop the rubber match to the Guardians on Wednesday, April the 5th by a final score of 6-4. After an off day on Thursday, April the 6th, the A's would begin their first road trip of the 2023 season as they would begin things with a 3-game slate at Tropicana Field in Tampa Bay against the Rays. They would drop the first game of that series on April the 7th by a final of 9-5, lose Game 2 in a blowout as they were shut out on April the 8th by a final of 11-0, and then they would lose by that same final score of 11-0 in the series finale on Sunday, April the 9th. After getting swept by the Rays, they would head into Baltimore for a 4-game series at Camden Yards against the Orioles. They would drop Game 1 on April the 10th by a final of 5-1, lose Game 2 on April 11th by a final of 12-8, win Game 3 by a final of 8-4, and then, of course, drop the finale of that 3-game series on Thursday, April the 13th by a final score of 8-7. After that, they would come back to Oakland for another 6-game homestand. The first 3 games of that 6-game homestand being against the NL East and New York Mets. They would drop the first game of that series on Friday, April the 14th by a final score of 17-6. They would lose Game 2 on Saturday, April the 15th by a final of 3-2, and then, of course, get swept by the Mets in the series finale on Sunday, April the 16th by a final score of 4-3. After that, the NL Central Chicago Cubs would come into the Coliseum for a 3-game series beginning on Monday, April the 17th, which saw your Oakland Athletics get blown out by a final of 10-1. They would drop Game 2 on Tuesday, April the 18th by a final of 4-0, and then they would get swept in the finale of that 3-game series with the Cubbies, losing the contest on Wednesday, April the 19th by a final score of 12-2. And, of course, we all know what came later in the day after that. Off day, of course, on 420, which for A's fans ended up being the worst 420 ever. Obviously, already talked about that earlier in the broadcast. After that off day on the worst 420 ever in A's fan history, the A's would begin a AL West road trip that would see them go through 2 cities for a total of 7 games. The first 3 of those 7 road games would be against their AL West opponents down in Texas as they would take on the Rangers at Globe Life Park. They would win the first game of that 3-game series on April the 21st by a final of 5-4, lose Game 2 on April the 22nd by a final of 18-3, and then, of course, lose the rubber match of the series on Sunday, April the 23rd, by a final score of 5-2. Their road trip would continue to take them through the AL West for the final 4 games of that 7-game road trip, as they would head down to SoCal and battle it out with another AL West rival in the Anaheim Angels, or as my co-host likes to call them, the Anaheim Devils. The A's would win the first game of that series in what would end up being a back-and-forth slugfest that would ultimately be won by Oakland by a final of 11-10. And then they would proceed to drop the final 3 games of that series in Anaheim, as they would lose Game 2 on the 25th by a final of 5-3, lose Game 3 on April the 26th by a final of 11-3, and then, of course, drop the series finale in Anaheim 8-7 to the Angels on April the 27th. They would close out the month of April with 3 games at home against the Cincinnati Reds, that 3-game series starting on Friday, April the 28th, which, of course, the A's lost to Cincinnati by a final of 11-7. They would lose yet again in the Saturday afternoon contest, which would go down on Saturday the 29th, 3-2 final in favor of Cincinnati. And then they would ultimately win the finale of that 3-game set with the Reds on Sunday, April the 30th, as they close out the month of April with a 5-4 win. First MLB team ever, by the way, unfortunately, to have 23 losses or more before May 1st. Just oh, wow. Fucking crazy what's been going on with these teams. Anyway, the most recent series of games that took place for your Oakland Athletics were the final 3 games of this most recent homestand that went down at the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum, as the Seattle Mariners came into town for a 3-game set. The 5-1-0 would lose to the 2-0-6 as they would fall 2-1 in the opening game of the series on Tuesday, May the 2nd. They would, of course, lose yesterday's contest by a final score of 7-5. And, of course, they would lose their game that they played today to close out things, as they get swept by the Mariners to end things on Star Wars Day, losing by a final of 5-3. So, yeah. Sum up things, God, when I told y'all that I thought these cats would end up being hashtag rooted in straight donkey ass 2.0, maybe that was an understatement. But either way, to sum up things at this point, not just with the performance on the field, the record. I mean, the crazy thing is there's games where these guys are actually putting up runs, and normally would be enough runs to win games. Problem's been, the starter's not going deep enough, or when they've gotten deep enough, the bullpen comes in and basically blows things, for the team at that point. And it's just crazy given the fact that what is this? This is 2023, 2-1. We're 4 years away, 5 years removed from having one of the most dominated and deadly bullpens in baseball, to a bullpen now that's a pile of freaking elephant shit. At this point in time. But, yeah, pretty much to sum up everything, the play on the field, this whole talk of them relocating and the fact that they're just getting slammed locally and nationally for it. I hate to say it, but I'm pretty sure y'all can agree with me that this image fully sums up how things are looking like at this point in time for the Oakland Athletics. And I hate to see it. Y'all hate to see it, but kind of hate to say it at the same time, as far as things go for those in the front office, y'all kind of deserve it at this point for continuing this penny-pinching bullshit instead of actually competing in a professional sport that's a part of a billion-dollar industry that is professional sports. But, yeah, just, again, hashtag Fisher out. Anywho, here is what the Oakland, for now, Athletics have on tap between now and when we come at y'all with the next edition of the show on 5-1-0 Day next Wednesday. The A's, of course, after getting swept at home by the Mariners to close out a 6-game homestand, will begin a 6-game road trip to play out things between now and next Wednesday, May the 10th. First of those 3 games will be down in Kansas City as the A's will head into Kauffman Stadium to take on the Royals. Game 1 of that 3-game series, of course, is tomorrow, I almost said April, Wednesday, God, getting my days so mixed up here. Friday, May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo, Revenge of the 5th, Cinco de Drunko, whatever the bloody hell y'all who's want to call it now at this point in time. That's tomorrow, 5:10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. First pitch between the A's and the Royals at Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. Game 2 will go down out there at Kauffman Stadium on Saturday, May the 6th. That'll be a 4:10 p.m. Pacific Standard start time. And then, of course, the finale of that 3-game series in KC will be a 11:10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time first pitch from Kauffman Stadium. After that, they will play the final 3 games of that road trip, and probably will be a 3-game series that they will most likely get destroyed. Basically, picture Godzilla and Tokyo. That's probably what's going to happen next week between the 8th and the 10th when the A's go to the Bronx to take on the AL East New York Yankees. First game of that 3-game series going down, of course, on Monday, May the 8th at 4:05 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Game 2 taking place on Tuesday, May the 9th at 4:05 p.m. Pacific Standard Time as well. And on the day of our next edition of the show, Wednesday, May the 10th, which, of course, is 510 Day here in the city of Oakland. The A's will wrap up that 3-game series against the New York Yankees in the Bronx at 9:35 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening during the course of these next 6 games for the green and gold. Hate to say it, don't be shocked if it's pretty much much of what's happened at this point in time. You know, it's been great to see at times, you know, the lineup actually put up runs on the board and, you know, again, score runs that you would think would normally, against most teams, be enough to keep them in a damn game. But just, you know, again, just it's crazy how ridiculously, you know, shitty the bullpen's been the last couple of years. And, you know, obviously this year the ability of the starters to not go deep in the games. You've had it happen a few times, but the few times it has, you had Mason Miller, you know, the other day, basically throwing, 7 no-hit innings, and what at one point was a dual no-hitter at the Coliseum between the A's and the Mariners. Gets pulled in the 8th inning, obviously, because he's young. He's the team's top prospect. You know, don't want him to get injured. I think that's all BS, of course, but, you know, it's the way teams function in this day and age with professional sports. And the bullpen promptly shits the bed, like they have this year and the last year or so. Again, just crazy. We're 4 or 5 years removed from having one of the best bullpens in baseball to a pile of elephant shit. Just, you know, it's freaking crazy what's ended up going at this point in time. And, I pretty much expect things to be much of the same, sadly, with this squad in 2023. You know, I'm not trying to bag on the guys on the roster or any of that stuff, you know, because there's obviously guys on the team that I love, Boss loves, you love out there. But just, you know, and it's sad to say this, but to some extent, given the whole possibility with the relocation going on, I am kind of sicko enjoying the performance that's going on, because it's just, you know, again, allows the opportunity for everyone to see the bullshit, stupidity, and, you know, ridiculousness that has been the mindset of this ownership and the previous ownership through the course of the last 3 decades. So, yeah, going to be real interesting to see how things play out during those road trip games against the Royals in Kansas City and the New York Yankees. And, look forward to seeing if they surprise us or do as expected and shit the bed in KC and the Bronx between now and when we come back at y'all with the 510 Day edition of AFR. On that note, let's go ahead and take a look at the current standings around Major League Baseball. You know, again, been over a month since we've done the show, so go ahead and take a look at things with these. I'm not going to be doing my whole little, you know, extravagant little breakdown of things with the standings at this point in time. I'll save that for when we resume doing things with next week's edition of the show. Should point out, by the way, when we resume things with the normal editions of AFR next week, again, given that there is the possibility of the team relocating, I've decided until further notice to no longer do a Down on the Farm segment. Yeah, I know it's been who knows how long since I last did the Down on the Farm segment anyway, but my thinking is, hey, who knows if this team's still going to be here in the future, so what's the point of doing that? So, yeah, until further notice, normally the Down on the Farm segment would have taken place after the look at the standings, but, yeah, until further notice, unless the team ends up staying here, that Down on the Farm won't be happening. Anyway, here are the current standings in Major League Baseball at this point in time in the 2023 MLB season. As always, we start off in the American League first because the AL is the league that the Oakland Athletics call home. And we always, of course, start off first with the A's division, which, of course, is the American League West, where right now you got the Texas Rangers sitting on top with a record of 18-12. The Anaheim Devils are in second place right now with a record of 18-14. The defending world champion Houston Astros are in the middle of the pack right now, just a game above 500 with a record of 16-15. The Seattle Mariners are a game under 500 and in the fourth spot with a record of 15-16, and sitting in last place with a record of 6-28. The only team with a win percentage that has a 1 to start off the numbers after the dot. And just checking things here real quick. It's the worst record of the American League, and sadly, it's the worst record in all of baseball. At 6-26 in last place in the AL West is mine, our Oakland, for now, Athletics. Let's go ahead and see how things are shaping up around the rest of the American League at this point in time. Over in the AL East, we have the Tampa Bay Rays, who just continue to ride that hot streak that they started off the season with. Started off the season, I think it was, 12-0, 13-0, or something like that before they finally took their first loss. Haven't really slowed down much since then, as they're currently on top of the East with a record of 26-6. The Baltimore Orioles are in the second place spot with a record of 21-10. The Boston Red Sox are in the middle of the division right now with a record of 19-14. The Toronto Blue Jays are in the fourth spot with a record of 18-14. And the New York Yankees are shockingly in last place with a record of 17-15. My roommate, or my former roommate, I should say, from when we had Dub 6 Studios over in the Eastmont Hills, who's a lifelong Yankee fan, is saying that this year the Yankees are doing things different. Everybody's getting hurt at the beginning of the season, so that way they can be healthy for the playoff push and the playoff run at the end of the season. Yeah, okay, Ron, if you say so. Yankees currently 2 games above 500, but in the last place spot in the East with a record of 17-15. So right now, at least over on the AL side of things, it's the only division where everybody's above 500 and competing for things in the division. And yeah, just scrolling through things, that is the case at this point in time. Finally, to wrap up the American League standings, here are how things are looking at this point in time. Over in the AL Central, where the Minnesota Twins currently sit on top with a record of 18-14. Only team in that division currently above 500 right now at this point in time, by the way. Second place belongs to the Cleveland Guardians, who are 14-17. Third place currently is the Detroit Tigers, who are 13-17. The Chicago White Sox are fourth with a record of 10-22. And in last place with a record of 8-24, the second worst record in the American League and the second worst record of all of baseball, is the team that we're about to play for the next 3 days, that being the Kansas City Royals. But yeah, still don't sleep on them. Given how the A's are, I wouldn't be surprised if the Kansas City Royals somehow steamboat over the Oakland Athletics during the next 3 days. Alrighty, on that note, that's how things are looking like right now at this point in time over in the junior circuit. Let's go ahead now and flip things over and see how things are looking like right now over in the senior circuit, as these are the National League standings at this point in time. First up, we have how things are looking right now over in the NL East, where it's the Atlanta Braves in the first place spot, currently with a record of 22-10. The Miami Marlins are in the second place spot at an even 500 with a record of 16-16. Tied with them in the second place spot, also with a record of 16-16, are the New York Mets. The Philadelphia Phillies are in the fourth place spot, as the defending NL champs are 2 games under 500 at the moment with a record of 15-17. And the Washington Nationals Nationals sit in the 5th and last place spot at this moment in the NL East with a record of 13-18. Over in the Central, it's this currently at the moment. The Pittsburgh Pirates, yes, you heard me right. The Pittsburgh Pirates are sitting on top of the Central right now with a record of 20-12. You got the Milwaukee Brewers, who are in second, a game and a half back of them at the moment with a record of 18-13. The Chicago Cubs in the middle of the Central Division, game under 500 at the moment with a record of 15-16. The Cincinnati Reds are in fourth with a record of 13-18. And a little bit of a shocker seeing this. It's the St. Louis Cardinals in last place at the moment with a record of 10-22. Finally, to wrap up the NL standings and the MLB standings overall for this edition of the show, is the division that for the last couple of years I've referred to as the Wild NL West. And kind of early on, it is a little bit of a wild NL West, as at this point in time you got a 3-team race per se for the division at this point in time. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers sitting on top currently in the West at the moment with a record of 19-13. The Arizona Diamondbacks are sitting in that second place spot at the moment with a record of 17-14. The San Diego Padres are in the middle of the NL West pack, 2 games above 500 at the moment with a record of 17-15. The San Francisco Giants are sitting at 13-17 in the fourth place spot, and the Colorado Rockies are sitting in the last place position in the NL West at this point in time with a record of 12-20. That wraps up things on the NL side of things, and that, of course, also will wrap up the standings for this abbreviated edition of the show. Again, I'll go ahead and give my little traditional crazy off-the-wall takes and thoughts on things in all the various divisions when we resume the normal version of A's Fan Radio next week on 510 Day. But I definitely will say that there are some teams out there that I'm not shocked by where they're at this point in time, and there are definitely some teams, not just good but bad as well, that I'm kind of a little shocked with where they're looking at this point in time. But yeah, I'll go back to giving my more in-depth thoughts on the standings when we do next week's edition of the show. As always, ladies and gentlemen, for the latest information pertaining to your number one source for everything and anything on your Oakland, for now, athletics, be sure to check us out at AsFAnRadio.com. Like/follow us over on Facebook at Facebook.com/AsFanRadio. Follow the AFR Madness over on Twitter at A's_fan_radio. Be sure to subscribe to and check out past shows and more over on our YouTube channel at YouTube.com/AsFanRadio. And again, given that it looks like the Wi-Fi situation here at Dub6 Studios 3.0 in the Dimond District has finally been handled, the plan is to finally get back to doing things over on the Twitch channel, which, of course, for those of you that have forgotten, is twitch.tv/AsFanRadio, with live broadcasts again, beginning with our next show broadcast, which, of course, is show number 335, the 510 Day edition of AFR. That, of course, will take place next Wednesday, May the 10th, at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, again, live over on twitch.tv/AsFanRadio. If for some reason it ends up being that the Wi-Fi stuff has not been addressed, hey, at least I'll have things going to record that 510 Day edition of the show, and if need be, then we'll just end up throwing it up here on the YouTube channel. But again, check us out at AsFanRadio.com, Facebook.com/AsFanRadio. Follow us over on Twitter at A's_fan_radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at YouTube.com/AsFanRadio. And again, be sure to check out the live broadcast of the show over on Twitch.tv/AsFanRadio, where you again can catch us for the next edition of the show on 510 Day next week with show number 335 on May 10th at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. On that note, it is time for my final thought on this abbreviated Star Wars Day edition of A's Fan Radio. First off, again, as always, thank you to everybody who's tuned into this podcast, regardless if you're a recent follower within the last couple of months, years, you've been following since we brought the show back in 2011, or again, if you're amongst those out there that have been following this bad boy since it got launched back in April of 2003. We thank you and we will appreciate you. And again, you're the reason why, had this show taken place a couple weeks ago, I ended up not killing AFR a couple weeks ago, right then and there, when this whole talk of the relocation to Las Vegas broke. Because, again, that's not fair to all of you that have been listening for the last several years, or for the last, how long has it been since 2011? Got to sit here and do math now. The last 11, 12 years since I brought the show back from its 4-year hiatus in 2011, and definitely not fair to y'all out there that have listened to the show from 2003 all the way up to this point in time now. Y'all are the reason, the big main reason why, regardless of what happens with this thing, that if they do end up going, the show will continue through the end of the year, and like I said, we'll do our farewell podcast of our 20th and final season a couple weeks after the season wraps up, with the postseason wrapping up, I should say, in November. Hopefully that ends up not being the case. Again, fool's hope that this whole crap down there ends up blowing up in the A's ownership's face, and they have to come back here with their tails tucked between their legs to get something done with Howard Terminal, or they finally get, the right thing is done by Commissioner Rob Manfred and the other MLB owners, which is to force this guy out and bring in a new ownership group that is actually committed to Oakland, committed to actually majorly privately financing Howard Terminal, and actually investing in roster payroll for the first time since Walter Haas last owned the team back in 1994. I really, like many of y'all out there, obviously hope that this crap blows up in their face. But, again, if this is going to end up being the case that they do possibly end up going there, hey, from yours truly, it has been a hell of a ride. These going on last nearly 20 years now, and we'll see it through to the end. But, again, I'm not going to support him in Vegas. The other half of Dynamic Duo is not going to support him in Vegas, and the rest of the cast is not going to support him out there. So keep your fingers crossed that this shit ends up not happening and they do end up staying here. But at the same time, mentally start preparing yourselves if you haven't been doing so, like myself and others. And again, the reality is I've been mentally preparing myself for this possibility to happen for the last couple of years now, basically since the whole parallel path thing got started, and even to some extent before that. If you haven't already, like myself and others, been mentally preparing for that outside possibility of a relocation to go down, you may want to start doing it now. I'm not saying, even with prepping yourself, that's not me telling y'all or trying to tell y'all to stop fighting for them to stay here, fighting for this ownership group to be forced out and replaced by one that's actually committed to the fans and this city, and going back to how things were 3 decades ago with the team, having an owner that actually gives a shit and wants to win and invest in the team and the community on a year in and year out basis. Keep doing that. Definitely, encourage y'all to keep, there's still tickets out there for that game on June 13th, where the plan had been to basically pack the Coliseum before all this, relocation stuff came to pass back on April the 19th. Still do that. Keep doing that. Those of you that are still going to be going out to games, keep bringing those Fisher out signs, sell and stay, all that stuff, And again, I don't blame my longtime friends from the 68s of, not having the drums out there. What's the point of doing that when you're basically sitting here and stabbing us in the backs and screwing us all over? And not just us fans, not just the community. Think about all the stadium, concession workers, security guards, stadium employees that, are going to possibly be out of a job if this ends up happening. I feel for them the most, especially given the fact that with how long I've been going out there, I damn near know almost everybody that works in that stadium, or, at one time did when I regularly went out there. But it's just, again, fucked up and ridiculous that it's gotten to this point. And MLB should have resolved this a long fucking time ago and force these guys out and put in an ownership that was committed to Oakland. So, will they stay? Will they end up going to Vegas? Stay tuned. We obviously will be here with y'all one way or another through at least the end of this year. And obviously, if they do end up staying, then we look forward to coming at y'all for many, many more years to come. But obviously, again, if they do end up relocating to Vegas, this will be the 20th and final year of AsFAnRadio. And, hey, given that this is a modified edition of the show, I'm going to go ahead and do a, my bad, I was accidentally click on an image that I did not mean to click on at that point in time. But yeah, given that I'm doing a modified edition of the show, may as well do a modified outro for the edition of the show. I'm going to go ahead and skip over doing the normal outro that I do. Yeah, no celebration. I will, though, bring that back for next week's edition of the show. I just, given everything that's been going on the last couple of weeks, just do not feel right ending the show with that. But I will bring back celebration for the outro on next week's edition of the show. On that note, the views and opinions of our cast, our guests, and our listeners are in no way, shape, or form affiliated with the Oakland Athletics or Major League Baseball. Hey, stay safe. Take care of y'all selves. Y'all know the drill from what I was always told in all the safety briefs I went to during my time in the Marine Corps. Wrap before you tap it. Don't drink and drive. That usual shindig, because we want to see y'all back here when we, as hopefully planned, return to doing live shows over on the Twitch channel when we do the 510 Day edition of AsFAnRAdio next Wednesday, May the 10th. Again, catch us returning to Twitch with our broadcast on Wednesday, May the 10th at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the 510 Day edition of AFR. And then again, the plan is to go back to doing the show every week. From that point forward, through the end of the season at least, should they end up relocating to Vegas. And if they don't, then yeah, we will continue going the show forward for many years to come. So yeah, take care, stay safe, because we want to see y'all right back here, same bat time, same Twitch channel. Obviously, you can also catch the recording over here on the YouTube channel as well for the 510 Day edition of AFR next Wednesday. Until then, good night, Oakland and beyond. And hey, even if our team right now doesn't look like that they want to end up doing it, I encourage and will tell y'all always, forever and always, be sure to stay Oakland, my friends.